podcast. So glad you could join us today.
Eric, it's an honor to be here. I'm really excited to be having a conversation with you here.
You know, we're both here in Florida. It's a scorching hot day. How has COVID been for you? You're up in the Jacksonville area, right? How has it been up there? Is everybody just hunkered down inside?
You know, Jacksonville's a funny place. I think everyone assumes, if they don't live in Florida, the listeners say who are joining us from outside of Florida, you assume that we're all crazy and weird, right? Well, Jacksonville is especially unique. So we did the whole, like, we're going to be one nation and all quarantine together for about 2 weeks. And then they took away the beach and then we revolted and now we're back out by the water. So the only thing that's different right now really is most companies are still working remote. If you go somewhere public, you need to bring a mask. Aside from that, everyone here in Florida or in Jacksonville, is still out there at the beach every chance they get. That's about it. So
it's surreal. It really is surreal. I mean, Florida hit maximum number of cases, I think 15,000 the other day. And I think it was the same day that Walt Disney World opened up again. So it's just a strange reality that we're living in.
Yeah, but you're Orlando, right? So you've got some stuff going on over there too.
It's crazy. It's crazy. But I'm glad that you joined us today. And I wanted to start out the podcast and just get a little bit of your background for our listeners here. So I know that you're a certified management accountant and you also work in the aerospace industry. What was your career goal like growing up? What did you want to be? Did you want to be in aerospace?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. Initially, I didn't know what I wanted to do in business. But I remember at one point, I saw my dad at an office somewhere, and don't ask me any questions about where or when that was or anything like this. But I saw him walk through the door, and I was walking with him, and he had to clock in, and he had papers handed to him the second he walked in the door. Somebody's like, hey, they need you for a meeting in about 20 minutes. Hey, you have a phone call waiting for you. And I just remember looking at that and being like, man, I want that to be me one day. Like, that important. I want that. And so I didn't know it would be aerospace. Aerospace, just with my age and recession happened to be around the same time. And aerospace seemed to be like one of those bulletproof industries at that point. So it made sense to go that direction. Anyway, I became one of those, doing air quotes here, really important people. And I come to find out those really important people are called middle managers, and they actually can't get anything done. They are slaves to the work, you know? And I felt that way. I remember walking into work and that very thing happened. The day that vision came true, I realized I walked in the door. There were 3 fires that had to get put out. There was a phone call waiting for me. I was already late for a meeting. All those things happen. And I just decided that, you know what, this was my dream as a kid. I've always wanted to be in business, which sounds strange to most people. You know, most people want to be like an astronaut or a firefighter. Yeah. I was like, I want to be a business guy, you know? And, but I decided, you know what, I need to find a way to work myself out of this. And that's kind of how I really made a name for myself, if you will, in aerospace, was that I figured out how to automate many different parts of the company. Fast forward years later, I ended up at a company here in Jacksonville, Florida. It's corporately owned this is one of our headquarters, but it's mainly owned out of Canada. So we trade on the Canadian stock market. Believe it or not, that's a thing for any of the Canadian listeners. You guys have that up there. But anyway, I worked my way up to the senior management level, and my responsibility since then has always been to take care of the company's profit margins, make sure we're making money, and then to implement automations and make sure that we're just doing things as effectively as possible. Because somehow I was the guy who figured out at a middle manager level that you had to do that if you wanted a business to grow. So my background in business has just kind of been school of hard knocks, if you will. I've just really thrown myself into it and did my best to educate myself however I could through experience and through just leveraging other people's information, knowledge, and it's been a really fun ride. I thoroughly enjoy business. Still to this day, it's something that I just love.
I chuckle at that story because my grandfather was also in the corporate world. And I remember at a young age feeling the exact same way. It's like, oh, I want a job where I have paperwork. I can't even imagine today, like wanting a job that has paperwork. But there was a point in my life where I thought that would be really cool. So at some point on this journey, you decided, hey, I want to be a blogger. How did you start blogging? What was the initial idea behind writing a blog?
Well, here's the funny thing. I'll kind of tie it into business because it's very different, right? I mean, but that's 2 very different things. But one day I hit the point where I had automated the majority of my job. I had great teams, great parts of the organization. And I got to the point where I was working about 36 to 38 hours a week. But when I was middle manager on salary, I was working 50, 60, even 70 hours a week. So for me, going from a very, very busy schedule, if you will, because it was busy. It wasn't important, but it was busy work all the time. Think even 60 hours a week, and then down to 38. I was like, I've got a lot of free time now. I realized, I got some free time. What are other passions I've got that I've always wanted to do? And I don't know what it was with blogging, but for some reason, when I saw that, I just wanted to give it a shot. I don't even know why, because in school growing up, I was like, this is the worst, English. I don't want to do this. But for some reason I saw it and I was like, I want to build a website, use WordPress. So it wasn't like a custom build or anything like that. But I'm like, I want to build a website and I want to actually share some of my own thoughts. Maybe they're business related. Maybe there's something else related. I end up starting off with talking about my Christian faith, but I was like, I want to actually write something. And yeah, so I sat down and it was because of the time availability that I then had. I felt like I could. So I devoted a few hours every week to it and really learned to write well, really learned to enjoy it. And the rest was kind of history. And we can jump into more of that if you'd like. But that's kind of where I transitioned into it. It was something I was doing along the side, just having a great time with.
So step one is really writing the content. Step two is getting the content found by people, right? You've got to put something out there to find it. So you had to develop skills as a marketer, as a digital marketer, to help get your content found. So talk a little bit about that. Was it just trial and error? Did you take classes? Did you have a particular guide? How did you get good at that?
Yeah, this is actually really funny because I'm not sure when this episode will come out, but I was listening to an episode you recently released with Elizabeth Pampalone. Yes. She was the first person I ever sat down with and talked to in person about WordPress. And the sad part about it was, and she helped me so much, I'll get to that in a minute, but the sad part it was 2 years after I started.
Oh my,
so
okay.
the first 2 years
already.
Yes, I had a lot of content because I started off getting excited about writing. I was writing every day. They're terrible posts. If you can find them anywhere, I apologize for taking your time to read those. But, over the time I learned a couple years later, and that's when I decided like I needed something. So I can remember realizing I was writing this stuff. My mom was reading it and maybe my grandma occasionally, like, I don't know if anyone else was reading it or not. I didn't really do much on social media. I didn't try putting it out there. It was a concept I had never thought about. I didn't have any background in marketing. I was a strategy guy for a business, like the last thing I would think of was that. But remember at the 2-year point, realizing I posted something really good. Like I looked at it, I'm like, this is incredible. Like this is a really good post. How on earth do I actually get somebody to read it? Because I think it would actually help them. And that same week I started thinking about this. I was telling my wife about it. I'm like, I don't know what to do. I was helping her find a meetup.com group. So she was on meetup.com looking for something. And I saw a WordPress meetup group in my local city. And I was like, there's no way nerds get together and talk about this WordPress thing. And sure enough, I showed up and it was like a workshop day and Elizabeth was there sitting at a table for newbies. I sat down at that table, even though I had been using it for 2 years, and was like, how do I do this? How do I do that? How do I do this? She taught me for 2 hours. And still this day, I say this, she taught me more in 2 hours than I learned in 2 years on my own. And ever since then, I've devoted myself to education. It hasn't always been her, it's been other people as well. But I've said, you know what? I need to invest in learning intentionally about this program. I spent money doing it. I spent time doing it, but it's always been so valuable. So from that point on, I was writing content, but making sure that it was going to be seen through different strategies that I started using, most of which were completely free and organic, which was nice.
That's so interesting because out there in the world today, you've got mentors, which I sort of look at as people who hold you accountable for your vision and can help you get to where you want to go. Mm-hmm. And then you've got coaches, which can actually provide you the skill set that you need to get there. And so many businesses don't take advantage of either. They struggle, they make the mistakes, and they could be so much further ahead if they would just reach out to resources that could give them the knowledge that could help them along that path. Have you certainly found that in your journey?
Yeah, 100%. For a while, I kept on telling myself, it's funny when you even mentioned that, because I said I need a mentor, and I thought I just need a mentor, and I started getting mentors, but they weren't helping me grow my content. My vision was growing, but the way I was getting that vision was actually getting further and further. And that's not the same thing bad about mentors. You should have them in your life, but you got to have a coach as well. You got to have somebody in there that can help fill in the gaps. You got to have that right tribe, if you will. At times for me, it's often been community based, where there's multiple people that we're all just pouring into each other, sharing our different feedback and the different things that we've done to be able to actually fill in the gap from where we are today to where we want to go with whatever it is that we're doing. And that's been a big part of my life. It definitely has.
So you started the blog, you got proficient at SEO and digital marketing through the help of people like Elizabeth. Mm-hmm. And then you sort of, if I've got the timeline right, you started to do some speaking, some coaching, and then you started a podcast. Was that original podcast? Was that really focused on these same skills?
Yeah, you know what? It's a funny story. You got the timeline all right, but like I didn't expect to do that. I mean, yeah, SEO came really natural to me. I sat down with somebody, and I can't even remember her name right now, so I feel bad. It was years ago, but the first person I ever sat with, I paid her for an hour and a half of our time. I'm like, I just need someone to explain what on earth SEO even stands for. Like, somebody help me out here. And she told me, go read these blogs from now on. Here's how you use, Google Analytics. Here's how you do this. All the basics, the things I need to learn. And who would have known, man, if that was a subject in school, I would have aced that all the way through. For some reason, SEO just makes great sense to me. Through and through. And I really understand how to filter good information from bad information, because there's like the technical SEO, non-technical SEO. Like, I understand what you really need to focus on to bring in a result. So I started doing that. My blog like really took off. I mean, I went multi-author with it after that. I had people asking, hey, can I write on your platform? It looks great, because I learned a little bit about that as well. And people can find it on search engines. Long story short, fast forward today, we have more than 130 people who write on that same original blog that I started. And now I take a back seat. I work on it maybe an hour a month. Like, I don't really do anything with it anymore. I have a team that runs all that. I'm pretty hands off. But around that same time is when speaking engagements started coming. People were asking, hey, would you talk about this? And the first time someone asked me to speak, I'm like, really? I had never thought about it. I'm like, me speak? I'm like, what do you want me to talk about? They're like this. I'm like, oh, well, I can talk about that. And they're like, exactly. Well, you do it. So I was like, sure. So I spoke one time, and that was the only thing I committed to. I was like, I'll do this once. I'll give it a shot. I told my wife. I remember right before I was walking up on a stage to speak, she was there because she's like, oh, I've never heard you speak. I'm like, me neither. So right before I walked on the stage, I was looking at her. I'm like, how did I get here? I'm like, I don't understand how I'm here. Like, I'm listening to someone introduce me right now. It's like a long introduction. I'm like, why am I here? And it's one of those things that life really will just take you places, like things will just open up, doors will continue to open as you devote to your craft and the thing that you're passionate about and that you love to do and devote your time to. And I fell in love with speaking the first time I got on that stage. I got on that stage and I had a line of people afterwards tell me it was some of the best content they've ever had. And I'm not saying that to be prideful at all. To me, it was humbling. Like, it brought me to like an emotional level I haven't hit. Like, I felt, I was like, man, these people like really, they needed help. They were where I was for those 2 years before I sat with Elizabeth. Like, they didn't know these things. And yeah, so I started picking up more speaking opportunities, and then people started asking me more questions. And like, so I was sending little voice memos, and I was like, maybe this should be a podcast. I've heard about these things. So yeah, my first podcast was just a very short, I called it Digital Coaching Sessions. Yeah. Really short, little SEO talks, little talks about blogging, just little tips and tricks, usually between 5 and 10 minutes. And that was it. And I got great feedback from it. And it was just, again, very organic. It was a natural flow from where I was going, if that makes sense.
So Neil Patel stole the idea from you?
Sure. Sure, we can say that today.
No, that's awesome. I had a guest on the other day, and they were talking about how they designed the job that they wanted, and then they sort of reversed engineered it. And to me, when I hear your story, it sounds like the exact opposite of that. It sounds like all these pieces came together, not necessarily with an end goal in mind, but each one sort of developed. And as they started to develop, you started to say, hey, there's something here. There's something, if I combine these pieces, there's something I can do with that. And is that really how creating a brand was born, as all these pieces came together?
Yeah, it kind of was, like after that little podcast I started doing, that short one, I actually ended up closing it down not long afterwards because I had no clue what I was doing. Same thing. I didn't follow my own advice. I didn't really give a lot of devotion to understanding how to launch it and keep it going and things like that. I'm usually a pretty strategic guy. I think at that point I was just excited and probably bit off more than I could chew. My wife would probably second that. She's saying amen in the other room, I'm sure. Like, it was just too much at that time. But I did know I wanted to help people. And at that point, again, my job, I was still this day thankful for that, the job I've had in aerospace. Like, it's a great gig, and it doesn't take up a lot of time though. It's just the nature of the job. So I started coaching at that point. This was a few years ago. And so I started just offering coaching, and I just would sit with people for an hour and train them and teach them. And at first I was really loving it, and I was helping a lot of people, but I realized if I was ever going to make that a full-time thing, I was going to need to charge a little bit more, and that's the nature of it, right? And then that was going well. But then one day I realized I wasn't helping the people I wanted to help anymore. And this was probably the time where I realized I had something here. This is when I realized the idea for creating a brand. But I was talking to myself. I was like, you know what? If you really want to help the people that you want to help, you're going to have to find a way to do this more affordably. You have to find a way to bring communities together and to help, to be all around helping each other. Like, that was the idea behind creating a brand. So I stopped offering coaching. I kept, and anything that I had going on, I continued. And, I stay true to that commitment, if you will. And then afterwards, like when those things were all gone, I just started creating a brand, which is community driven. It's my podcast, which I launched and have been very consistent with, as you know, Eric. I haven't haven't had any problems with that now that I knew what I was getting into. And the community is just a free element that goes along with it, where I'm just there to help educate, more of a facilitator, if you will. But I'll meet with people one-on-one any chance I get to jump on a Zoom call. And occasionally it turns into money for me, which is great. But I always think it should be a byproduct. So years ago, when I decided to do this, I started saying this line to myself that, Alex, you are going to be a person of value, not a person of profit. A person of value, not a person of profit. And I found that when you really are that person of value to other people, where you follow the direction that you see that you can help people the most, profit does follow. Might take a little longer at times. It might not come as natural, but you will find a way to make that happen. And that's just the way I've done this. So creating a brand came very organically for me. It's been very strategic since the day I launched, but it did happen organically. I kind of fell into that, if you will.
Well, as I mentioned when we kicked off the show off air, that you and I met at PodFest when it was here in Orlando last year. And you gave an invitation after we had met to join this Creating a Brand community, which I did. And that was really one of the things that pushed me into podcasting.
That's
and
cool.
So I really appreciate that. And it is a great community. What are some of the challenges that you've had building a community? Because I know that with anything that's community related, right, it takes a critical mass before there's engagement. So what are some of the is it just simply getting the number of people into the community that you need to build that critical mass? How do you encourage people to be active participants?
Yeah, this is one of those things where when I started this, it was just, what was it, like a year and a couple months ago at this point, when I launched it. So it's not that old or anything like that. But I launched using a strategy that I had recommended to me from the platform provider. I use Mighty Networks for the community building platform, which I highly recommend. Not saying that they didn't give me a good way to do it. I just look back now, I think that it could have been done differently. And because of that whole reason, it has a network effect, right? Anything has a network effect, which basically means it gets more valuable the more people are on it. Well, when you launch it and you launch with a podcast that has no one listening to it, because when you launch, everyone has 0 listeners. There's no downloads the day you launch your first episode. When you hit that launch button, it says 0 for everybody, and we all work our way up. I didn't have massive influence online, so I had a handful of people join. But the problem was it was really small numbers. So if I were to go back now or recommend to anybody, if they're thinking about starting community, I would start with actually some sort of email or text opt-in saying, hey, here is what we're going to do. Here's some things you can do till then. So basically give them something for free. Like if it's a little checklist on how you can prepare for this community that's going to be launching, that way you can kind of build up a little bit of an audience before it launches. So when you have a launch date, you can have 100 people on there or 50 people on there, whatever it might be. But it's better than the 1 or 2 that join and are like, there's nobody here. What am I doing here? Right? It's the reason that when we go to a conference, there's a start date and time, right? Because people just filtered in whenever they wanted, they would just turn around and leave because there's not anyone else there. But you say, hey, it starts Friday at 6 p.m. Be there. Everyone shows up that time. But I think that when we launch online communities, we have this different mindset of we'll just open it up and people, they'll funnel in over time. But really the better way to do that is on that initial launch is to get as many people in there as possible and have some good content planned and ready for them. So when they join in, and you got them all coming at one time, they start sharing, this is what I'm passionate about. They'll all see it and be like, oh, Eric really likes, he wants to start a podcast. I do too. Maybe he'd be a good guy for me to talk about. I wonder what he's learned so far. Wonder how he's editing, right? Someone shares editing. Someone's like, ooh, I'm an editor. Like that would have been a much better approach. I did not take that approach. It wasn't recommended to me through the education I was getting. Again, different for everybody. But I think if I were to go back, that's the way I'd recommend to really get a network effect going from day one.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It really does. But I know, the community is called Creating a Brand, and you've done a lot around creating your brand. You're very active on social channels. Everything always points back to the Creating a Brand community. Even your call to action within your podcast is inviting people to join the community. And then once they're in the community, obviously that opens up a lot of other opportunities. Talk a little bit about how you have built your own brand and how you've been intentional with what you've done across your various channels.
Yeah. So like you're saying, everything is a funnel back to the community. I mean, even the podcast is, that's the free educational element that we love. I mean, the Creating a Brand podcast has just done amazing things. I've had some really good success there. It's grown a lot. It's been incredible. And everything at the end of the day brings people into the community. And for me, I realized years ago, Eric, because going back to being like that systems and strategy guy, right? My ideas aren't that great. Like just being real, like my ideas aren't that great. They don't bring in a lot of money. Like I can tell you how to turn an idea into money, but my ideas from a creative element aren't necessarily always the best. I do have some good ideas here and there, of course, like all of us. But in general, I realized if I was ever going to succeed in business, I can't rely on just me. And when I had the realization that the best businesses in the world, the ones that are the most successful, were not built off of an idea, but instead off of a solution to somebody else's problem. When I had that mindset shift that my idea has to come from a standpoint of what is somebody struggling with and can I offer a solution to that? When I had that shift, I started succeeding far more. So for me, the creating a brand community isn't even about people buying the courses that are in it or joining the paid groups or anything like that. Like, sure, that's all great. Really, it's can I identify any trends of problems that this group of people is having that have trusted me to be part of the solution. So I always engaging that. And I had the idea of podmatch.com from the community. I watched people continuously struggling with the same thing. And I said, you know what? I have an idea. I bet we could offer a solution to that. And so for me, bringing everybody into the community, making all my funnels come there is where I can begin to just filter out different ideas and ways that we can all help each other and offer true solutions. Again, going back to being that person of value, I want to add value to their lives and somehow help them go further faster. And it's really been a great way for me to do that.
Well, you talked a little bit about this in that last piece, but there's a big element of time management that goes along with everything that you're talking about here, right?
Of course.
Because you've got your regular job, you've got to edit podcasts, you've got to interview, you've got to be on shows, you've got to write social media posts. And I know your wife helps you out as well. And I know you did, it was either a YouTube video or a podcast episode itself, I don't remember, talking about time management and some of the things that you do. And the reason this triggered is because you talked about the ideas that you see when you're interacting with people within the community. And I know you've got that book of ideas. It's one of your tools. Could you just give us the short synopsis of some of your time management techniques? I'd really encourage people to go and watch your full episode to talk about that. But talk about how you manage your time.
Yeah, man, Eric, this is such a good topic. I'm glad you brought this up. It's a great question to bring up. And I think it's really valuable for the audience because so many of us struggle with this, right? Like the idea of, oh my gosh, this guy Alex has a full-time job and he's doing a podcast and he has a community, right? I think most people's initial response to hearing that, like, oh, he's just one of those jack of all trades or guy who just can't keep himself grounded, like he's doing everything. And it's not true. I'm actually extremely intentional. It's one of my biggest, I think, one of the things that makes me strong as an individual, as a business person, is my ability to be very intentional with everything I do. So at first, when I started getting into all this, like, remember, I had all that free time once again. I was working 40 hours a week at most. And so I had, for me, what was free time coming off of working 70 hours a week. So I had that. But initially, that wears off. And then you're like, oh man, there's a lot to do. And it can get really stressful, right? You look at everything that you have going on. You're like, how am I doing this? And then Eric had this crazy realization. And it's that there are 24 hours in a day. And I didn't realize that. And everybody has 24 hours in a day. So anybody you see doing anything amazing in the world, they have the same 24 hours a day that you do, which I've always found, when I had that realization, my wife was like, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, I realized I work 8 hours a day. I sleep, between 7 and 8. So let's just say 8. There's still 8 hours there. What do I do with that time? And she's like, oh, that's a good question. I don't know. So I started doing what I just call taking inventory of my time. And I quickly realized that there was 3 hours a day going to TV. There was an hour and a half going to just scrolling on social media. There was an hour that I can't even give accountability for. I don't know what happened with it. I started adding it all up. I'm like, oh man, I'm actually not living very intentionally, even though I believe I'm an intentional person. So what I started doing is deciding to actually monitor and time block. So I started looking, okay, here's my inventory of what's important to me. What can I remove was the first thing I did. So I started just taking things out that were commitments that I didn't need anymore and that really had no value. Certain things like as simple as subscribing to a YouTube channel. And I always want to watch their videos. It wasn't somebody I knew. It was something that maybe made me laugh. But I was like, you know what? I probably don't need to do this anymore. And you take out 15 of those and it's like, okay, that's 4 hours a week that I just gained, like things like that. So I took inventory, I removed things, and then I figured out the things that really need to be there. And then I time blocked those things. And doing that has helped me so much. In addition, the last thing I'll mention is having a meaningful evening and morning routine is so important. Making sure that you're really intentional with when you're going to bed, with what you're doing before you go to bed, and then the way that you wake up. So for me, I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of it, if you will, but I make sure that an hour before I go to bed, all tech is off, TV's off. I'm preparing to go to bed. I'm careful with what I eat and drink every day. Make sure I exercise. I want really good sleep because when that alarm goes off at 5:30 in the morning, I want to jump right up and do those first 7 things that are instantly important to me so I can jump right into my day. And doing that has really helped me to maximize my time. And believe it or not, I still have a lot of free time. Like I'm not a guy who has every minute of every day just booked. Like last night, I went to dinner with some friends. It was, we were wearing masks, of course, but I still went to dinner with some people that I wanted to go to dinner with. And tonight is a free night. Like I'm not gonna have anything going on for a few hours, and it'd be time that I spend with my wife, or I hang out and just read a book or something like that. And it's just because I've gotten really intentional with that 24 hours that I have every single day, and really owning my time, keeping it under control, and making sure that I know that I'm in control of my time. It's not in control of me. Has really been the big thing.
Can you talk just briefly about how you use your books? Because I thought this was very interesting that you're a believer in writing things down, not necessarily using an electronic tool, but you've got your checklist, right, of things that you have to do, and then you keep your ideas separately. I thought that was great.
Yeah, a lot of this goes back to the GTD methodology, getting things done by David Allen. It's a very popular way to kind of manage things, and he uses an analog. I guess he just has like a little notepad that you can like rip notes. It's almost like you're getting a ticket on your car, like the cop writes it down and rips it off. He's got something like that. And I kind of implemented something similar. So I have like a little checklist. I write everything down. So my checklist is, here's what I've predetermined I'm going to do today. And then I have whiteboards, which if, I know you're watching the video, I've got 3 whiteboards behind me right now. I make sure to write everything down there. And I've got a daily journal, and everything is going into these, and all filters into one inbox where I then go back and review it. I'm like, okay, this is something I wrote down. Like Eric had this good idea. I wanted to look at the editing software he was using. I may go back to that tomorrow and look at it and be like, you know what? I'm really happy with what I'm using. I don't need to do this. And I will just throw it away. I might do, or I might say, you know what? No, this has merit because this would actually save me time on editing potentially. I need to actually look at this. And then at that point, it's going to end up on my calendar, which makes it end up on my checklist, and just making sure I'm being really intentional with it. And again, I think the reason that I got rid of so much of the tech side of things, because I used to have it all on my phone, was just I'm addicted to my phone, if I can be honest with you. Like I am addicted to it. So anything that keeps me away from it is healthy for me. Anything I don't have to do there is a good thing. So I've kind of like put that off, if you will. I just make sure that I've got my different notepads. And it's funny, people will know me, they call it my little black book because I walk around with it everywhere. And I just jot down little notes here and there. But it's helped me a lot to really keep organized and to keep really intentionally focused.
And getting things done is a great methodology. It is. Read the book. The book is so jam-packed with information, but it's good information, and it's a great system. I want to switch back a little bit to talk about the Creating a Brand podcast, because I know you've entered your 5th season now. Congratulations on that. That's awesome. How have you seen the podcast evolve? If you go out and listen to episode number 1 compared to where you are in your 5th season, how have you seen the show really evolve?
Well, Eric, I'm scared to go back and listen to my first episode. I was so proud of it back then. It was a year ago. So it launched just over a year ago. It launched on July 2nd, 2019. And I was really proud of it, put a lot of work into it, got a lot of great feedback. But now I just know how much more polished I am, if you will, as an interviewer, an interviewee even. And so I don't know what it sounds like, but it has evolved a little bit. Initially, when I was getting started, I wasn't sure who my audience would be. I thought maybe it would be people that are already established in business. It's ended up being people that are really beginning stages of their entrepreneurial journey. And I made a couple pivots along the way. I made some very slight changes. If you guys can listen to the first episode, it was just kind of like, hey, it's your host, Alex Sanfilippo. You're listening to the Creating a Brand podcast, And now it actually goes in talking about helping people make that first or next step in business, have a little bit more of an intro. It's not much longer or much different, but I've made some serious pivots, if you will, in my mindset of who's listening to the podcast. So the way you hear me interact with the audience when I'm asking the guest questions is different than it was a year ago. And that's just a matter of really listening to people. Like podcasting is a little bit one-dimensional, as you're not sure who's listening, but there are ways, becoming ways, I should say. Thankfully, it's starting to evolve a little bit. You can see who's listening, their age demographic, and thanks to the Creating a Brand community, I can actually see who's listening. So, by the way, I'm in Jacksonville, Florida, and we are having a thunderstorm. This is every afternoon, but here it is.
I heard that. Give us a little bit of a preview of what's coming in season 5.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm so excited about this. So this is the season that we've really, the whole season's finished, which is great. It's fantastic. We're done with the entire season. So we're done through September. And we just picked out guests that are really going to help the audience continue to move forward. So I actually got a little bit heavier into some more personal development type of things. So there's still some business. Of course, there's always going to be business involved. But like the one that came out this week was heavily talking about how to leave in the midst of uncertainty. Like we live in very uncertain times right now, right? Like no one's sure if we're ever going to go back to work, if, what's happening in an election coming up. Like there's all these questions we have. So we wanted to get into like, how can we lead ourselves and our business as well? And there was the other topic that I really got into was, I thought, really important, because I was realizing entrepreneurs are having this problem that when people are out and about with friends, when they're hanging out with family, wherever they might be, they tend to be somewhere else. Like you can look at their eyes and just tell, you know what, they're not really here. Like they're talking to me, but I can tell that their mind's somewhere else. And so the whole concept of it was actually Dr. Ivan Misner, the founder of BNI. The way he put it was, be where your feet are. And so I really wanted to drive that idea home a little bit with the audience, was just, hey, let's make sure that wherever we are, we're living there at the fullest. Let's be where our feet are. So again, it's a little bit of a shift from like really heavy business and marketing topics to a little bit more of like, how as entrepreneurs should we live our lives to stay healthy? And in turn, I believe that does grow our business.
I like the thunder and lightning. It adds some real authority to what you're saying.
Doesn't it? I got that just for you.
It's great. I think the whole presence thing is a huge problem that we're facing in society right now. And I haven't noticed it very this interview. You know, we're on a video conference and you can pay so much attention to people's eyes and where they're going because you move just a little bit away from the camera and you're no longer making eye contact with somebody, but you've got notes and cameras and things like that. But in person, that same thing is going on. And too often we just lose that connection with people because you can tell they're looking at their phone, they're looking at something else. They're not present.
Yeah, I've found it to be true. And honestly, I've been very guilty of that. Like if I'm going to be completely transparent, as I've been growing the podcast, especially initially when it started growing, taking off, I couldn't keep my eyes off of things like analytics, which don't matter. They really don't. You know, they're good for research and for data if you need to, but there should just be intentional times when you're checking. But being glued to that and then thinking about if I'm going to land that next guest, if I'm going to get that guest thing slot on a podcast, if Eric's ever going to let me come on his podcast, you know, things like that. But in all seriousness, I've been guilty of this as well. And I just see that it actually really, it's going to hurt your life long term. I believe that one day, you know, we're all going to pass one day. I don't mean to be morbid by saying that, but one day we're going to look back and we're not going to be like, man, well, back in 2020, I had great analytics on my podcast. You're going to say, man, I really wish I would have given that friend more attention in my life. I would have really poured into that relationship more. And I've seen this happen time and time again with people that I even know that have passed, unfortunately. And all of them, everybody I've ever met, they just say, I wish I would have invested more where I was. And, you know, it comes in form of their friends, their family, whatever it might be. And I just think that as entrepreneurs, we have to remember that because the world around us tells us go faster, you know, go harder, keep on moving, don't stop. Like you don't have to sleep, you know, all these things. And the truth is we have to slow down and really enjoy life and the things that really make it meaningful. Because at the end of the day, if you achieve all the success in the world, but you give up your own life, what's the purpose of it, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, you mentioned earlier that one of the things that you do in the community is you look at the discussion, you see where there's need, you see where you can add value. And you briefly mentioned it earlier that you've come up with this new solution called PodMatch to really address this sort of problem of people being able to find shows where they can highlight their expertise and for hosts to be able to find guests that are appropriate for their audience. So is this now the Tinder of podcasting?
Yeah, I have not used those words, but yes, it is. Well said.
Perfect. Tell us a little bit about what you're working on and what this product is all about.
Yeah, you know, it's actually funny you say that. I didn't download Tinder, but I downloaded Hinge.
Yeah.
I've been married for almost 8 years, and my business partner in this, the guy who's helped me develop it, he has been married for like 10, I think, or something like that. And we were like, I think dating apps have this. I think they have that. I think it works like this. And finally, I was just like, you know what, Jesse, like one of us just needs to talk to our wives and download one of these apps and see what it actually does. And he's like, well, I'm not doing that. He's like, for sure, I'm not doing that. I'm like, all right. So I told my wife, I'm like, I need to get on a dating app. You know, of course, I explained it a little different. But long story short is I downloaded one of those apps and I just kind of got an idea for how it worked to see if it would actually be a solution to the podcasting space. Because when I went to we both went to PodFest in early 2020. And the community, I've been able to filter there as well. But I asked people, what are they struggling with? And the common thing was, I can't find guests for my podcast. On the flip side, it's, I have a new book. I just wish I could find a podcast to actually talk about it at all. So I was hearing things like that. I'm like, okay, that's kind of like online dating. It's usually the same thing. I can't find any good girls. I can't find any good guys, right? So when I downloaded one of these apps and started looking into it, I was like, this is exactly what we're looking for. This is for sure the solution that's needed. And so we built it out. We found the need. We started building out the solution, and since then it's been incredible. Like actually, truly matching people. They register to the account; it's free, and from there, it's literally just saying, "Okay, you like to talk about this? Here is some guests that will actually really go well for that podcast that you're trying to launch or that you are doing." And it's been great. It really has offered a good solution. We've gotten a ton of good feedback. We've done zero marketing. We're starting to work on that now, but we've had a few hundred people join without us even really talking about it. I haven't even posted about it on my social media, and we still had a few hundred people join already, which is really cool to see that proves me it's an answer to a problem that people have if they're showing up, finding it, seeking it out without anyone even talking about it. But it's been really good. It's been very fulfilling for me to watch something really help people like it has been.
It's a great idea. It's a great solution to a problem. I joined the beta group. I've already found 3 guests from it, and it's been a really positive experience. And I know with each passing release, it gets better and better. So I really wish you a lot of success with that product, because I think it definitely meets a need in the marketplace today. Excited to see it go full public.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that, man. It means a lot to have your support in it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for inviting me. So, Alex, we should probably wrap things up for today. This has been a great conversation, but tell people how they can find you online.
Yeah, the best thing to do is just go to creatingabrand.com. Or if you're interested in being a guest on a podcast, or you have a podcast of your own, you're looking for guests, you can go to podmatch.com. Either way, I'd love to meet you in the Creating a Brand community. So again, creatingabrand.com. All the blue buttons on that website will take you straight into the community. It's completely free. I just love to meet anybody who have helped impact, or just maybe has a question about something I shared. So Eric, it's where you and I have been able to develop a great relationship, and it's been a lot of fun. But those are the 2 places that I'm really primarily at.
That's great. I will definitely have links to all of that in the show notes so that people can find it. Alex, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate your time today, and appreciate all the valuable advice that you've given me as I've launched my own podcasting journey. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem, Eric. Thank you again for having me. And by the way, you are a fantastic host. I'm so excited to be able to share this episode when it goes live. You're doing a great job here, man. Keep on adding that value.
Thank you so much.